A top Trump Treasury Department official has suddenly resigned, and it's not getting enough attention. So, Brian Morsi, the Treasury Department's top lawyer and general counsel to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, abruptly stepped down after only 7 months on the job. This is someone appointed by Donald Trump himself and confirmed by the U.S. Senate. And his resignation comes right in the middle of one of the most disturbing legal and political controversies we've seen surrounding the Trump admin this year. Here's the core issue. So, Donald Trump filed a lawsuit earlier this year against the Treasury Department and the IRS demanding $10 billion in damages over the leaking of his tax returns years ago during his first term. Not only was the sitting president of the United States effectively suing his own government, but a federal judge began openly questioning whether the case was even legitimate in the first place. I'm talking about Kathleen Williams. So, Kathleen Williams is a federal judge in the Southern District of Florida that was overseeing Trump's IRS lawsuit before it was dismissed. Judge Kathleen Williams asked both sides to explain whether there was an actual legal controversy here or whether this had become what amounted to as a collusive proceeding between Trump, the Treasury Department, and the Department of Justice. And right before that explanation was due to the court, Trump suddenly dismissed the lawsuit with prejudice. Now, that by itself is already extraordinary, but this is where things get even more serious. So, a settlement agreement surfaced showing that the Trump admin had allegedly agreed to create what's being called an anti-weaponization fund worth roughly $1.776 billion. According to the agreement, the money would be directed into a fund connected to future claims involving the people prosecuted for January 6th. And here's the part that alarms legal observers and possibly officials inside the Treasury itself. So the judge stated directly that no settlement agreement had been disclosed to the court. Normally, when a lawsuit is settled, both sides tell the judge, the settlement is disclosed to the court, and the judge understands why the case is being dismissed. But in this situation, according to the judge, the Department of Justice asked the court to dismiss the case while allegedly not informing the court that the settlement agreement even existed. And that's where the controversy is. It's not just there's a settlement. The bigger issue is, did the government fail to properly disclose the settlement to the judge while asking the case to be dismissed? The concern again is around the lack of transparency, judicial oversight, whether proper legal procedures were followed, and why the agreement allegedly wasn't disclosed up front to the court in the first place. The judge then issued what many legal analysts are interpreting as a warning shot. She emphasized that the DOJ attorneys have an independent obligation to be candid with the court and to ensure transparency involving public resources and government conduct. That language matters because judges do not casually insert warnings about professional obligations and public accountability into rulings like this. What appears to be happening here is that the court is effectively placing a marker down for future, signaling that if attorneys knowingly conceal material information from the court, there could eventually be professional or even legal consequences. And now, suddenly, the Treasury Department's top lawyer resigns. Again, this was not some anti Trump figure. This was a Trump appointed official. And it raises a very obvious question. Did he not want his name attached to this? Because if you are a top lawyer inside the Treasury and billions of taxpayer dollars are potentially being routed into a legally controversial settlement tied to January 6 defendants, that creates enormous ethical and constitutional questions. There's the 14th Amendment in the Constitution, which states that the United States shall not assume or pay obligations incurred in aid of insurrection or rebellion against the country. That is why this story is becoming so politically explosive. There's this is no longer about rhetoric surrounding January 6th. This is about taxpayer money. This is about whether the government institutions are being used to reward political loyalists. And this is about whether attorneys inside the federal government believed they're being pushed into conduct that could someday threaten their career, their license, or their reputation. And to be very clear, I personally believe this should alarm people, regardless of party, because once government institutions begin serving political power instead of independent law, every American should be concerned about where that road leads. And more broadly, this is why critics of Trump's administration continue warning about the authoritarian behavior. Historically, authoritarian governments often reward loyalty, protect insiders, and pressure institutions to serve political power rather than independent law. This is the deeper concern we are talking about. Not simply one resignation, not simply one settlement, but the idea that government agencies themselves are being reshaped around loyalty and political protection. And when high level lawyers inside those systems suddenly walk away, people should pay attention. Lawyers at that level understand risk better than almost anyone. And when they decide they no longer want to be associated with something, it usually means they see danger ahead. Follow this channel as I continue covering the political stories that are shaping our country and our world right now.